backstory. It seems no matter who we are, where we've been, or what we've done, we all have one simple thing in common. Everyone has a backstory.
Well, it's another story. Yeah. We looking for change? Hello? We want to see some change? Or do we want to be change? Everybody here needs to be the change, right? This is not a spectator sport. This planet requires participation by all of us.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Cowboy Bob, and that was Michael Shields. I said it wrong last time. I know a man by the name of Robert Shields, who also is a celebrity, who used to be Shields and Yarnell. If you're old enough to remember when they did the mime routines back in the 60s. And Robert was also owned a radio station in Stone, Arizona, and I had the pleasure of knowing and working with him for a bit. Michael Shields is the gentleman who does the entry, and the music is from Michael and a band he had formed at a time in the past called Earth and the Next Society. And that is the title of the song, is It's Nothing But a Story. So story in a word, I think, is the title. But that's Michael Shields, and that was Earth and the Next Society. I'm Bob Banfield, or Cowboy Bob to my friends. There's very few of them, but you can feel free to call me Cowboy Bob. Sitting next to me and making all this possible is the king himself, the man from up the mountainside, the guy who has all the buttons and knows which ones to push, the one, the only, the almighty, the enduring Odin.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome, children of all ages. Oh, don't worry about Bob, he's just talking. Oh, what's up, people?
It's what they don't pay me to do. By the way, my disclaimer, I do not own this platform. I do not own the network which is carried on this platform. I do not own this show production, although I do own the title. I am not compensated, reimbursed, or otherwise given anything on behalf of my ideas, my concepts, or my opinions. I give those freely. So if I offend you, too bad. You know where the off button is. Other than that, okay. I'm here for open conversation.
Well,
so
I
had a plan.
I want to start it. No, I want to start the conversation.
Wait a minute. Your mic is way off.
Oh, my mic is off? Hold on. Let me get it on.
You're like way like half the decibel level.
A half a decibel?
Half of the decibel level.
Half of?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I was hiding. I was hiding. It's just another story.
Bring it down a little bit.
Okay, just a little bit.
It's very distorted.
It's distorted?
That's better.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hear
Don't get squeaky on me, little girl. Stick with me here.
Well, listen.
Looks like you've earned those horns behind your head there. I find that square up. That is such a very interesting.
No, this is me and my man.
You gotta sit
forward. Okay.
Because when you sit forward, you literally fill the helmet. Keep coming. Keep coming. You block out the helmet, and the horns literally come out of your head.
Let me go.
You just have to sit. There you go. Come a little bit to your left. There you go. Sit. There it is. See, and the horns come right out of your head. It's perfect. It's like I'm wearing the hat and you're wearing the horns, and it works.
I'm gonna leave you alone, Bob.
I'm gonna lose the hat.
Okay.
So I might get into some other hats tonight. I have some ideas. So anyhow, I'm not gonna do another one of those commercial things like you did last time. The next time I'm gonna make you show me that first. I would never have agreed to air that personally. I found that terribly offensive.
Which one?
But the one from we're gonna steal your children.
Oh no, we're gonna indoctrinate your children. I mean, honestly,
that was just bad on so many levels.
Did you go back and really listen?
I have a problem with the people that just the whole promotional package was bad on so many levels.
But did you really listen to it?
But at any rate, for those who are tuning in, those who don't know, okay, my man Odin got to feeling a little queasy after my last show, which was Thursday night last.
I blame it on you.
And obviously I knew you would. See, I was prepared for that. I'm, after all, also AKA Robert St. Cloud, the world-renowned psychic and telephone tarot reader guy. Okay. Knowing that, Friday you woke up, I take it you felt like absolute crap, and at some point you felt so bad that you went to the hospital. And
you
they
starting.
found Lambda.
They found her. They found her.
She was. Do I understand this correctly? Lambda.
Oh, you see, you playing with me today. Yeah, they found her, and you know I'm gonna have to respond, so you know what you're doing.
No. Because I'm getting to a specific question.
Okay.
And I understand that you're hesitant to talk about all of the things that went on in the hospital, and I don't want to know all the things that went on in the hospital. Or what kind of shape and condition you were in. You're not there now, and that's a good sign. However,
yes,
when I didn't hear from you and nobody else was hearing from you and a couple of shows got dropped because there was nobody there to push the buttons, I finally spoke to you on a telephone.
Me and you spoke for hours.
One of the things you said to me was, and it made me get vaccinated on the way out. And you mentioned that on the Facebook thingy for Jern. And somebody responded, and that question rose to my mind too, is if you have the bug and you've come in there for whatever kind of treatment for the bug, wasn't the vaccine, I mean, aren't they supposed to wait like so many days after you recover from the virus before you get the vaccine?
Oh, so we're going that direction. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice.
So that's just a question I had. Now the other
answer
question that goes along with that is who held the 357 to your temple and said, boy, you're going to take this here shot one way or the other.
Well, the way I was feeling.
You agreed to let them poke you in the arm with the whatever they gave you.
The Masters and Johnson. The Masters and Johnson. Well, this is what happened. I went in there. My immunity was at damn near zero. I was sick as a dog. And you know something? You set me up. But that's okay. I like the way you did it, Bob. You did it smooth.
Thank you.
You're an ass.
I used to be a journalistic radio
You're an asshole, but I love you, Oh, sorry, Mr. Asshole. Mr. Asshole.
Excuse me?
Barking. Asshole. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, how?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just so everybody knows, this ain't even scripted. This is not even planned. He came at me on the left and the right, and I'm still staggering.
Scripts.
I can't do it.
20 years in broadcast television and 10 years in radio, never had a script.
15 years here and never did a script.
I wouldn't even follow a playlist. I didn't know how to read the PR's playlist. They'd hand me a playlist and say, this is what you're supposed to play. And the only thing I got out of that was, okay, I'm supposed to run a commercial at this point on the hour and this point on the hour.
See, so...
And they left me on the air, so I got away with it.
So how did you get that job in PR?
Who cared, right?
How'd you get that job in radio?
No, you're not diverting. I'll tell you that story. Actually, I'm telling that
story. Tell the story right now.
In Volume 3 of the Journeys of Wolf Dancing and Cat Prancing, which is my memoir.
Which I gotta read.
Which covers 60 years of my life and all of the weird and strange crap that happened to me, along with the fun, the excitement, the glamour, the glory, and I did make a few bucks along the way. I didn't get to keep most of it, but I made a few. But back to your backstory. Okay. You said they made you take the vaccine before you left the hospital. Now, I don't care what they made you take, and I don't care what was going on under the table. I want to know what they did that made you take something I know you were opposed to taking.
Well, I was opposed to taking...
What was it they did specifically?
Well...
What did they threaten you with?
Well, first of all, there's no known therapeutic, it's not a vaccine, therapeutic for Lambda or Mu. It skips.
Okay.
So that's one issue. Second issue is I needed to boost my immunity up. Last issue was
giving you the COVID virus shot. Which one did you get? Do you know?
The Masters
Did
and
you
Johnson.
get Johnson or
The Masters and Johnson. We ain't call it a J&J. We call it Masters and Johnson. You know what I mean. Yeah.
the master of my Johnson.
Yeah. The master of the Johnson. Yeah. So I had the master.
For those of you who are old enough or the right neighborhood to understand that, I don't apologize.
I don't apologize. At least you know what time it is. And I'm telling you, Masters and Johnson ain't Masters and Johnson. Back to the point. 3 days in dirt. Back to the point. In the sand.
It was the two under the dirt that really counted.
Yes, it did. Yeah. So I've had to do it because, number one, there is an experimental trial that they were offering. And number two, and I'm not talking about it.
I assume you don't actually have hospitalization insurance, right?
Oh, I do. I'm VA.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, okay. So you've got VA. Okay. All right. So that's the same thing I've got. I don't have the.
Yeah, I used to go to Hayden Medical in Phoenix.
I used to years ago, but I don't anymore.
I used to go to Hayden Medical in Phoenix. You know, the big hospital, Hayden. Man, I loved it.
When you get to the end of book one, Daryl, you'll read the story. I died on the floor of John C. Lincoln Hospital.
No, you didn't. Lincoln was nasty.
I died on the floor in the waiting room at the ER.
Lincoln was nasty.
John C. Lincoln Memorial Hospital at like 11:55 p.m.
Lincoln was
on the 31st of March. Now tomorrow is April 1.
Gotcha.
April Fool's Day. Right? I dropped dead, not breathing, heart stopped. Okay, on the floor of the emergency room, John C. Lincoln Memorial Hospital in Phoenix.
Yeah, yep. Lincoln was nasty.
And that started my third journey in life, which I'm writing now, which is a third book.
Oh, okay. So let me continue. So in order for me to be able to do that, they gave it to me on the second day I was there, which was Saturday morning, and my immunity went up a bit, and then they said I was okay. I was able to take the experimental trial, and I'm not going to name the company. I'm not going to name anything about it.
No, that's cool.
But
I just wanted to know what leverage was used, because the way
there had to be something leveraged.
Those who are listening or watching, God, I really feel for you if you're watching this. Okay, I'm looking at it and it scares the hell out of me. But if you're listening to this, okay, so I spoke to Odin.
Yes.
It was Sunday afternoon, right? Midday Sunday.
Yeah.
And he could scarcely stay awake. As a matter of fact, he nodded off on me like twice on the phone. And I just sat there, and I could hear him breathing, but he wasn't answering me, and I assumed he was sleeping. And he'd go, "Oh, I'm here." He'd wake up all of a sudden, and, "Oh, yeah, I'm still here."
I'm still here.
So he was in pretty miserable shape, and that was Sunday afternoon. But here you are, and you definitely sound better.
My oxygen
and you
level
look better than I would have anticipated physically. I mean, your facial structure, you look sad.
My oxygen was low. I was at 93.
Yeah.
And
that's dangerous. Anything below that is dangerous.
But I knew it was working because I didn't feel that heaviness in my chest, my lungs. It wasn't hard to breathe as it was the day before.
You had referenced concrete in my lungs.
Yeah, concrete feeling. It was tough. But see, people got to understand, there is something out there. And I'm going to say it nicely. If you say to me again that ain't no virus, trust me.
I don't think that, I think that has been one of those misconstrued. Well, I'll tell you what, getting back to the show platform, welcome to Backstory.
Welcome to Backstory.
Generally, I am not one to mimic the fad or the trend, but there is nothing anywhere. The headline since 6 o'clock p.m. last night Pacific time. Okay, so that would have been 9 p.m. New York. Everything has been about and construed through back and forth to do with Facebook.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, I'm not one to follow trends, but here's the topic of the day. It's not what you think of Facebook, because let's break it down. Let's do the backstory. A long time ago, and I don't remember exactly the year, I was introduced to it in, I believe it was either late 89 or early 90, and it was dark and dreary and snowy outside. My wife was attending university in the field of computer science, computer analytics, computer development, software programming, that kind of job. And she brought home a computer. And I can't even tell you what it was. It wasn't a Commodore. It was a Dell computer.
The big
and it
box.
had Microsoft Windows on it. Like the very first version of Microsoft Windows on it.
3.1.
Might have been a beta test model version. And she brought that and a little monitor and sat it down on my desk, and she introduced me to the world of computers. Now, prior to that, I was doing marketing and advertising, and primarily for events and activities. So I was in the concert business. We did sporting events. We did whatever you could promote to the local community to buy tickets. That's how I made my living. Okay, I was a promoter. And I was stuck in Northeast Ohio. And so she put this thing in front of me. Prior to that, I had a layout table in my, what was the office in the basement of the house that was, looked like a newspaper layout table, and better letters and different markers and this, and then you would take photographs of that, and then you would take those photographs over to the print shop, to try to get anything done. So I would make posters and stuff for concert events and sporting events. I'd make them by hand. Well, she showed me how to do it on a computer, and that was the end of that. I got rid of the table and went directly to the computer. You didn't have to feed me twice. So while I was in this environment, this thing called the internet kind of was coming together. And the first thing we had was something called AOL, America Online.
Hey, St. John's, SJC, proud owners of it at the time.
Yeah. And so anyhow, so this was the first experiment in the social platform of the internet environment. So prior to that, it was a lot of electronic transfer junk, but there really was nothing at either end. It was a teletype, came out on a roll of paper. So like the newspaper, you could put something in it, and then it would go down to another computer, and it would print it out on the newspaper rolls, right? And it would come out as the New York Times. So that was as sophisticated as the system was at the time. There wasn't anything out there, very little. And so AOL was this place where you could join the AOL group, and by logging into AOL, having a membership to AOL, you could now type in the name of who you were looking for, and if you had an agreement between the two parties, which was known to AOL, done through the system, much like making friends on Facebook, then you could access that person, and you could leave messages, or you could chat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, there was no visual here. This was simply text, right? You could type and chat back and forth. And you could have multiple people in the same room, and you could carry on a conversation with your cousins in Iowa and your aunt in Florida and your grandparents in California, all at the same time, could all get on here and chat. That was AOL. Well, the problem was people started getting into these suites. And what they were doing is they were being very disruptive. They weren't invited, and they weren't welcome, and they came there simply to be agitators because they were bored and it was something to do. So this sort of killed the whole AOL thing. People kind of drifted away from it. So then we went into this thing called MySpace. Now, MySpace was cool. You have to understand, I was in the entertainment business. So everybody that I knew was on the road all the time. They were never, they were never next door. They were seldom ever in this town. They were somewhere. So MySpace allowed us to all have controlled environments. You could select your friends, and people couldn't get into your page unless you gave them permission to be in your page, which meant that all the bands out on the road, the agents, the managers, etc., I could stay in touch with them all the time while they were touring around the world, around America, because we could all go to MySpace and we could exchange messages in MySpace. And it was better than telephones because in those days, cell phones were just getting to go. They really had not taken off. They were not commonplace. They were expensive, and they didn't work in a lot of places because there just was no signals yet. They didn't have the towers.
Had it dropped.
So,
Lots of drop.
that took, they had dark spots where you couldn't get a signal. And so MySpace kind of worked, and it was kind of good, and you could put your profiles on there and all of that. And in the range of all of this, this is where common thinking comes in. The mass population, as it was understood at the time, started seeing these sites as being their personal portfolios. And that's the best way to put it to an analogy, a portfolio with a resume. So by the time Zuckerberg comes out,
Zuckerfish,
and we have Facebook, right?
Zuckerbitch.
We have people, primarily high school, college, real heavy college, okay, who are now seeing this as, I can put my photo up here, I can put my work history up here, I can put my artistic and creative history up here, I can put references from other people, I can demonstrate my popularity and fame if I ever got wrote up in the newspaper, if I ever got a citation from the mayor. I can post those up here for you to see. And all I have to do is tell my future employer, go to my site, and there's my application. Now, remember, Daryl, when it was actually, and this would have been your time coming out of your first years of college, okay, when that was kind of the sort of the pretense of what an employer expected.
But bro,
they wanted to see your site, right? That was part of it. You could hand them a written resume, but they wanted to see your site. They wanted to see, primarily because they wanted to see a demonstration of your skills.
Because they had none.
Working on a computer. Could you do the things to do all this? How pretty could you make your Facebook page look? Now, something here changed back in 1990.
I'm going to tell you what it was.
Prior to that, we had network broadcast television. Well, we had cable TV.
Cable TV.
Which was wire fed. So it's cable because there's actually a signal being sent from a television station, a studio, through a live wire to a distributorship, and the distributorship is boosting it up and spreading it out by cable to every household that subscribes, and you plug it into the back of your TV, and you now have 50 channels that
Hold
you can
on.
choose from.
You got one more thing you're missing. Dish Network was there also.
Well, that came, but that's
right, yeah.
So then satellite, so then cable, so then broadcast. Okay, now broadcast, when it started out, really wasn't networks like you see today.
No.
They were
real networks.
Affiliate systems where big stations like New York had the power and the energy to be able to send a signal to another station in another town, so as to carry a larger audience demographically without having to reproduce the signal effort. In other words, the studio time. So your local television station has a local studio. It does its local news, weather, and sports in its little studio, in its building, in your hometown. But it also receives what used to be a microwave, that's your satellite TV. So before you could get satellite, they were using the satellite system idea to send a signal from that big station in New York to all of the Eastern Seaboard. And that became the NBC network.
Yeah.
Then they started building stations. Now, primarily, when I was a kid, there was one, I think it was NBC. There was one network in Phoenix, Arizona. There were 4 stations on the air,
Right.
one of them being PBS.
Yes.
But the other 3 were all independent stations, okay, which were cooperatively taking the news from AP and CBS or ABC or NBC, but they weren't carrying the programming. They were still carrying their own ID programming. So that was, then it expanded and everything became the network broadcast center. So then the independents got lost. The guys that made little things like we're doing here, they got lost. They couldn't play in the big game. Before that, you had the radio, and before the radio, now we're talking, this is 1940s, ladies and gentlemen. This is not 100 years ago. We got the radio. People sat around in their living rooms and listened to the president talk to them about going to war on this newfangled contraption called the radio.
I love the
Prior
radio.
to that, you had things like the newspaper and mail. Now, mail from New York to LA could take as much as 10 days to make the trip.
Or more, depending on the weather.
Rail could get there faster
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't have so much sorting to do. Newspapers were printed, shared information, and the telegraph, that wonderful ... which started it all, let New York tell Chicago, Chicago could tell LA, so the local newspapers could print the local news. That's 100 years ago. 100 years ago. I am over 65, but okay, so but we'll go with 65.
I don't hear you yet, Penny.
Okay, only so many years ahead of my birth. None of all of this existed that we know today. Now here's where Facebook comes into the game, and here's where Dr. Odin comes into the game with his PhD in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Because they went to the psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the universities and the colleges, and they had great plans, and they did a lot of research, and they messed with a lot of kids' heads trying to figure
Denzel
out
Washington.
how to reach the kid. How do we get to you? What makes you spin? What gets you to trick the trigger? What colors make you act? In what ways? What cartoon characters do you prefer? So that we can make those the logos on the cereal boxes, so we can get you to nag mommy at the grocery store till she buys you a box of that crappy ass sugar and flour that you call cereal, that you can't live without when you're 4 years old. But trust me, which character is it? Is Tony the Tiger? What is it? See, they did all this research. They went in and they took kids out of schools and they put them in programs, and we have names for that now, like MK Ultra, etc. Basically what it is from my perspective was they were just trying to figure out how to control our actions. Could they stimulate us in a certain direction to do a certain thing on a certain agenda? And now we have something like Facebook, where we have access to everybody everywhere all the time. News is now something that is seconds away. It took hours for people on the West Coast to know that JFK had been assassinated in Dallas.
What happened to Penny?
Hours behind time before they heard the news. Okay, now it would be a matter of a minute. Okay, it would be all over all the social networks. Bang, 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 everybody be seeing it.
Don't laugh, I'm doing something.
They've gotten you hooked on all this information. Used to be, you didn't know what was going on. So if a plane crashed in New York and I was living in Phoenix, I didn't know about it till I saw it on 6 o'clock news. It didn't affect my day. It was not an immediate crutch on my emotions in the middle of my day. I found out about it in a time slot. Now it's instantaneous. Instantaneous. The sheriff puts out an alert and bang, everybody in the county's phone rings. Alert is there. Everybody now has this piece of information. They call it an Amber Alert here in Arizona. So it's a missing kid kind of scenario, right? So it's up immediately everywhere. If you if you agree to it, you're logged into TV. So this is where we are. But we take things for granted. It's human nature. We've been taking things for granted for 100 years, expecting more, expecting more, expecting more. And they've been feeding us more and more and more with our anticipation till we got to where we are now. But we don't appreciate it. We expect it. We're entitled. We expect it. We want it. The question now comes down to, it wasn't whether Facebook was offline for 7 hours yesterday. It wasn't even how Facebook got offline for 7 hours yesterday. It's why was Facebook offline for 7 hours yesterday.
To feed your addiction.
Was it a little kick in the butt, or as my daddy used to do, a little nop in the back of the head as you were going by, right? Going, so, you heard about the whistleblower, did you? You think they got us by the skinnies now, do you? Look here, this is how it really works out. My name's Zuckerberg, and I'm Richard Sheik, and I can do whatever I want. And I own it all. It's all mine. My great-great-granddaddy was a Rockefeller. Okay? I own it all. I'm the richest man, and I own the biggest power, and I control everything, and I am the Wizard of Id. And you know what? I'll take it off the air. How do you like me now?
And all my subsidiaries.
You jonesing? You need me back? Is it hard sitting at home staring at the screen going, I got nobody to talk to. I got nobody to tell me. Nobody's sending me their selfies.
No Masters and Johnson. No Masters and Johnson.
Poop? I need to know. Did the dog go out? I've got to see. I've got to be in touch. I've got to be connected. Shut me off and see what happens. Hey, man, take away the dope from the junkie and watch his reaction. Okay? And folks, I'm sorry if you're watching me right now here, it's because you're a junkie.
I gotta see you, man. I gotta see you. I gotta have some. Let me hear your voice.
Hello, Penny. How are you?
I can't hear you, Penny.
Are you speaking? Yes. Hi, Penny. How are you?
Penny, you're still squeaking.
You're not. Yeah, your audio's gone, lady.
Oh my God.
Are you muted?
Let's check and see if she's muted, everybody. We're gonna check Penny Bradley. In fact, you know something? We should just mute her. Oh, she'll be back. She's gonna reload. Listen.
So at any rate, out of all the crap I've listened to over the last 24 hours, from various networks, including Newsmax and Fox and ABC and CBS, and I don't do NBC because I don't get them in this valley. I don't think this valley would get them anyhow. I live in a kind of weird little valley. You've been here, Odin. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's very agro, man, out on the desert.
He's out there in no man's land.
Chaparral world, But at any rate, what I've taken from all this was that, Facebook did the, Facebook went down mysteriously as punishment. Actually, as a warning. It's not a punishment, you see, it's a warning.
Warning. Keep messing with me.
Yeah, and now here comes the bigger question. So Frances Haugen, I think is her name, if I pronounced that right. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce it right.
You butchered it.
And let me tell you, young lady, if you're not doing anything this weekend, I got, you can, and my number is, well, you can ask Odin, he'll give it to you. Okay, anyhow.
Studio is open?
I question, because here comes the strategy. This is what they did to me, see, when the MK Ultra thing, okay? They never called it that. I never heard that title, although in the process of the program that I was taken out of grade school and put into at Arizona State University, or on the campuses of Arizona State University, because I'm not sure that the university was actually involved or aware of what was going on. I think they may have leased out that part of the property to these people. But at any rate, this research program that I was involved in for 3 years, they played games. They gave scenarios. They asked questions.
Like war
they
games.
planted seeds. They did plant seeds. They did test our awareness. They did test our intellect. Not so much in IQ testing, but they tested your intellect and your ability to pick something up that was going on in the shadow. That if you weren't bright enough or alert enough, you would never notice what's going on. It would just be there and you would not pay attention. Whereas another kid would watch the same thing and go, so how come that guy back there is, running wires from here to there and connecting them to this room and then running over to what's going on here? See, and that kid, they would then move to the next program, right? Because you just showed, an aptitude for thinking through a situation. So that's what I participated in. And, but from those strategies learned in those days from playing their games, I have to question if Francis is a plant.
Come
on now, Zuckerberg's a smart boy.
Yeah.
And if Zuckerberg wants to manipulate the public opinion off and outside of the Facebook realm, where he knows everybody knows he's behind everything, right? So we don't want to come off as the total megalomaniac. All right, we'll leave that to Eldron or whatever his name is, Elon. Okay, he can be the megala.
Hold on. They even said Trump was one. Come on now.
So in order to keep his shadow presence active, okay, he would send a so-called whistleblower out with the right documentation in order to get a reaction that would drive to exactly what he wants in the end agenda. Right? So what looks like it's an attack on Facebook is in fact a maneuver to get Congress to do something that will benefit Facebook in the end.
Now I got a statement for you. First of all, you got to.
Very Zuckerberg, man. I'm sorry, but that's him. If you ever spent time looking at video and things about him in his younger years, it's definitely who he is.
And he still is. But
he's a game player. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me start off by saying, you got to bring the Grinch back in, because the Grinch got to answer some of this, because I know the Grinch has been through it all. So let's get that started. Number 2. Miss Penny, can we hear you today?
I don't know. Can you?
Oh, well, we love you. You got that pretty voice, girlfriend. What's up, Grinch? And has anybody noticed me and this man right here are starting to look alike?
Bring your chair.
You and him? No, you look more like Forrest. What's his name?
No, that's my cousin. And
that does the credit card commercial.
Oh, okay.
What's in your wallet?
What's in your wallet? All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk to the.
Sorry, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's my.
I'm still trying to shake people down to get what's in their wallet. Penny. And Grinch, Grinch Lou. That's where we're going to go. Master Grinch Lou.
Grinch, as you call him, is actually my longtime partner, Luther. And
Luther.
Most.
Oh, we going with the real name.
Long-time loser? Did you say loser? I'm still not hearing that right. Your long-time what?
Partner.
Okay,
we have been shocking together for 20 years. If you need it that graphic.
Hey! Now, I met my old lady in 1970, late 75, 76. We took off together. We were 36 years into this relationship and a kid that we were raising together, based solely on the fact that we rode a merry-go-round at a carnival. Okay, awesome. No marriage license whatsoever. And for years, it started out every year, and then it was on the 5th, and then it was again on the 10th, and then it was again on the 15th. And I would say, hey, babe, you want to go make it legal? You want to go get married? Would it make you feel more secure and safe and all of, everything? And she would say, no, not now. maybe when you get your together, okay,
I'm
keep
done.
working on it, and then that would be the end of the conversation for the next couple of years. Anniversaries would come and go, and then I'd ask again, and she'd say, and finally, after 36 years, she said, I think we probably ought to go get married legally. So we did go to Laughlin and get legally married in front of a justice of the peace and all that good chunk, with arrows and pictures and paragraphs on the back of each one. And I don't have the 8x10 glossies. I don't know where that went. But
Well,
no, I understand that partner
I've been
part.
married
Yes.
twice, and both husbands tried to kill me. And when we went through the mandatory counseling as part of the divorce process, both of them told the counselor that the marriage license was their ownership papers on me. So I refuse to be property. And
You know what? I don't argue that
to,
point at all. I support that completely.
Lou and I are partners. We
Yeah.
are together because we want to be, not because of some damn piece of paper that says I belong to him.
Yes. And I'm just an old hippie, but that was our attitude too. We didn't need that piece of paper to justify what we were going to do. And I wrote a book, or I'm writing a book. It's a 3-part memoir, and rolling into what's going to be 600 pages in totality. Not quite a congressional bill, but it's on the way there, and a little bit more humorous, I hope. But no, I get that. We had a very mutual relationship. She had her life and I had mine. And when it started out, it wasn't really romantic. It wasn't a lifelong commitment. It was a let's see what's going on here. And I was fed up with
I can dig that.
Yeah, I was fed up with where I was doing what I was doing. I wanted to be back. I was in Ohio and I wanted to be back in Colorado, and I wanted to be back up in the mountains on a horse ranch, and that's where I wanted to be. And it's a long story and it's in the book. But at any rate, Tracy didn't want to be where she was anymore either, which was in Northeast Ohio, where she had lived most of her lifetime. And she wanted to go, and she wanted to go see the Pacific Ocean.
Awesome.
That was her goal.
It's worth
seeing. She was 19 years old and Barbie doll in blue jeans and a work shirt. Okay. And so she says, she was the waitress in the restaurant. I was the cook and she was the waitress. And that's how we met. And she said, well, I'm going to go. I think I'm going to take off and go west. I'm tired around here. There's nothing but waitress jobs. You don't make any money. I'm looking for something else in life. And I'm going, and I went, girl, you can't head out on the highway by yourself. It's not logical. Okay, this is 1976. This is not 1967. I hitchhiked all over the goddamn USA in the 60s, from one van and one semi truck to the next, never had a problem, never ran into a jam, and never went hungry. Okay, but okay, that was in 1967. This is 1976. It's a different world, and a girl like you out there by herself hitchhiking across America, they're going to find you in a gutter.
Yeah.
Okay. And, they're going to define you by the one tattoo you have on your ankle that you put on there when you ran away from the Catholic school that they put you in. And you put that tattoo on her. She did it to herself on her ankle so that she could be identified if they ever found her in a ditch. It's exactly what she told me. It's a story she related. So at any rate, I said, I'll go with you. And I
still have virgin skin.
Yeah. I said, I'll hitchhike with you. I'm going to Colorado. It's on the way. That'll be a couple of days. We'll spend some time together. We get to Colorado. If we're not ready to kill each other on sight, okay, maybe I'll go on with you to California. Maybe you'll decide to stay. Well, in this story, read the book. Okay, it's in the book. Took 200 pages just to get through that story. Okay, so at any rate, so no, I get that. And we had this 50-50 relationship. It was, this is yours and this is mine, okay? And in a pinch, it's ours. Not except for this or that doesn't count, or, because when we started out, Honest to God, our wedding was at a carnival in Canton, Ohio. We rode the merry-go-round backwards, which is the traditional form of getting married at the carnival. And we took off together. And it was a partnership agreement. We had a backpack. We had 5 pairs of jeans between us, the same size.
Both of you?
We wore the same size jeans at that time. Okay, that would change over the years, but for several years we wore the same size, same length. They were too long for her, but she'd fold up the cuffs. But we wore same waist and same basic blue jean. So we had three. We had that between us. Yeah, we had that between us. And our personal socks and a couple. I mean, we had nothing, and like $50 in cash between us at the time, and we took off hitchhiking west. And, so as the years rolled on, 42 of them, all told, and hell, I'm still married to her. So that would make it 45 now. Okay. Cause she's been gone for 3 years, but I can't get past it. So as far as I'm concerned, she's still in the other room. But throughout those years, it was, it stayed that everything we had was ours because we started with nothing. And then when the kid came, it became predominantly ours. Okay. This is our responsibility. We did this. Okay. It took both parties to make this happen. And now we've got this. And I guess it's our responsibility to take care of it till it can take care of itself. And my kid was raised on the 1890. I have to lay a joke in here or I miss the context of the whole show. So my kid was raised on the 1890 plan. Do you know what that is?
No, explain it to us.
The 1890 plan is when you turn 18, you've got 90 days
to get the hell out of my house.
That's the 1890 plan. And you start learning about that when you're about 11. Okay? You are on the 1890 plan, kid, so you might as well plan for it now because it's going to come a lot quicker than you think, and because you will have 90 days to get out of my house. Yeah.
I gave them 1 year after they graduated high school.
Oh my God!
Hold on.
That was my 90 days after you graduated high school.
And then I started charging them rent, and gradually increased the rent until it was more than they would have paid elsewhere. And they were smart enough to go, I need to move.
Yeah.
Hold on, we can move in together.
I have a hard time relating with that attitude. I left when I was 11 the first time.
Well,
and didn't look back. They had to drag me home. It was a state police in Indiana drug my butt home. Okay,
well,
the first time.
My family, I was raised in a Christian cult, and my family, their way of getting rid of a daughter was they married you off.
Yeah.
And if you didn't find somebody on your own, by the time you were 19, they found somebody.
They marketed you out. Yeah.
That was what my first husband was.
Yeah. Very Roma-istic. Okay. Yeah.
So,
that was the daughters were chattel to be bartered for property, wealth, purpose, or function. Okay. Yeah. And in my family, which were Northern Europeans, okay, of some royal noble bearing. I was adopted, so I have no real claim, but they were. The premise there was
my family.
The premise there was for a titled household, such as an earl or a duke, okay, to be able to marry off their daughters to gain more land.
Yeah.
Or to merge households under one crown. So if you ever watch Downton Abbey, okay, they were the Crawley family, okay, but he was the Earl Dalton.
Yeah.
Okay, he was Lord whatever it was, right? Earl Dalton, okay, which was not his name. His name was Crawley. Okay, so they married, they married to build those, to support those. Even in that story, they talk about he married his American wife for her inheritance.
Yeah.
To save Downton Abbey. Okay. You know.
My family, they moved to America because they were Scottish Covenanters, and when Cromwell took over Britain, they were on the shit list, so they came to America.
Yes,
And
I was. My family came from Kent. The coat of arms was stricken. The name was removed from the books. Warrants were
Jeez.
put out for their heads. They
yeah,
fled to Ireland. There is some
yeah,
question as to how long they were there in Ireland, but they were in Ireland at least for a full line season because of sailing time. From there,
yeah.
they came over to Prince Edward Island. From there, they went down into upstate New York. And from there, they went down to where my family tree comes out of St. Clairsville, Ohio. But these are the married offsprings of what was somebody out of the Stuart House of Scotland and
We're
himself,
cousins.
Your
the
cousins.
conqueror. Okay, so the story goes that my last name is Banfield, which was Banfield at one point with a Y, Banfield, and before that it was Banfi
Feed.
of the Banfi region of northern France. So when the conqueror came up to England, supposedly that ancestor was one of his generals, probably a cousin, right? Most likely, because the generals generally were related in some form or another.
You
So
pretty much had to be from that bloodline to have that
yeah,
kind
and
of
and and in
position.
order to get the in order for the conqueror to settle relations between the northern, which were the Scottish, and the southern, which were the English, as he was conquering the land, taking over control and becoming the first king, um, he the somebody, the Banfi, married somebody, the Stuart,
Yeah.
likely a Banfi male to a Stuart female, as the story goes. And then from there, okay, the Somerset, Kent, where they were for generations. Now, that raises a really curious question because that kind of makes them Jewish.
Yeah, it does.
If
Uh,
you look at the
yeah.
landscape and the history of the time, that was pretty much the Hebrew capital.
That that's the big secret of
And see,
the
we know that
royal.
the Hebrews migrated into what was at one point Belgium and down into northern France,
You are
and
children of Cain.
established a stronghold in northern France, which was supplemented by the Viking raids, because the Vikings would go down
And
through
destroy.
Gibraltar,
Mm-hmm.
and they found the northern southern Mediterranean, but the northern coastline, southern Mediterranean, and they met Jewish people. And the Jewish people taught them things about mathematics and compasses and so forth and so
Well,
on. It's in the
I'll
nomadic
put
legends.
I'll
They don't
put
make any
it
bones.
I'll put it this way. When my family made contact with me, they called themselves Nazi Jews.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this was 2 years ago. So this was, you start doing your family tree on Ancestry,
And you
and
don't
you
Well,
know
that's
make
what's
why I
gonna
write in
fall
a
out.
book, because
and you make
yeah,
it public, and when you make certain family connections, you start being contacted.
yeah.
It's like, we didn't know you guys existed. What happened? And I go, they went to North Carolina, then they went to South Carolina,
Carolina.
then they married into what they thought were peasants, and they went west. And they go, oh, we lost you. And I'm like, well, sorry about that. Not my fault.
Were you looking hard?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
was kind of my parents. They were kind of like, after about third or fourth vacation I took without leave. Um, there was that was the era where kids' faces on milk cartons at the grocery
yeah, I
store.
remember those.
Yeah, and so it kind of got to that level, and then at that point, it was sort of like, well, we've got him, and they said, okay, well, you keep him. And it was kind of like, but he's a minor. Well, we don't care. And they said, well, either you come get him, or we're prosecuting you. And so then it was, okay, they would come get me, you know. And of course, after I figured that out, now I had them by the short hairs because I could take off whenever I wanted to, and they had to deal with it. They couldn't just dump me someplace. They'd have to come get me. And I realized that till I was 17, and a judge said, you're either going here or the Army, boy, which is it going to be? And I went, I'm too little to go there, and you're going to give me a gun to go over here. I'll take the route with the gun in hand, because if I'm going down, at least I can fight back. You know, Smith, you know, God made big men and little men. Smith and Wesson made them equal. Okay, so you send me down to boys prison in southern Arizona until I'm 21 years of age. At this size and this body weight, I ain't going to live long enough to get out of there. So at least this way, you're going to give me a gun. And although 150 million Asian people are going to try to kill me, you know, at least I got a fighting chance. You know, so
I just pick up guns on the way.
At any rate,
Lewis,
my subject matter at the point was about Facebook and whether or not we're being played.
But hold on,
of course we're being played.
Of course, but hold on, we got Lou in the background. Lou.
The funny part is my folks moved out on me.
Mine did that once too. I came home and they were gone.
We're originally from Ohio. I was born and raised at Altman. I was born at Altman Hospital in Canton.
I was on the air on the radio in Canton, Ohio. WTIG, WOAC, TV 67 to Son of Ghoul.
I grew up in Malvern.
Okay, that's from my wife. My wife lived over there on a dairy farm as a foster home.
The dad had a big truck farm down there, and now it's a trailer park. At least it was last time I was back there.
East or west of the racetrack?
We were about 10 miles out of town.
So you would have been west of the racetrack, because the racetrack would have been farther out then.
Yeah.
The one where they built their little doobie cars and ran around in a circle out there in the mud.
Well, that was probably after we left there. We left there when I was about 6 or 7.
Oh, okay.
Which would have been in about 54.
Yeah, see, I started out, to my knowledge, okay, I started out in Massillon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and my family was in Perry Heights. I had an uncle that lived in Perry Heights. I raised my kid in Perry. He went to Perry schools, graduated from Perry High School. We left out of there. Now, I was adopted in 57, I believe it is. 57, 58 was when I was adopted. So where I was prior to that's not relevant. So at that point, I'm now living in Massillon, Ohio. And so we left there when I was about 5, and we moved to Scottsdale, which then was a one-horse town. I mean, it was a hole in the desert.
The funny part is we moved from Ohio when I was about 6, I guess. We moved to Coolidge, Arizona.
Yeah. Well, that was what was happening, and Buckeye was becoming a place too. You know, because that was Goodyear.
Yeah.
And then we moved down to Sentinel.
Yeah. See, Goodyear and General, both out of Akron. Okay, were heavily doing recruiting.
Yeah.
Okay, in those days to get Ohio labor. You know, they wanted to get the mill guys and the factory guys, and you know, the not the engineers, but the engineering guys, right? They wanted them for all their test centers they were building out in Arizona. Coolidge was one, Goodyear was one, Scottsdale was where they all lived. You know, it's where the money went. Yeah.
When we lived in Ohio, he delivered coal, and we moved to Coolidge, and Dad ran a gas station there, and then down Sentinel he took over as a manager, and then from there we moved to Needles.
Whoa.
And then we moved to Klamath Falls.
Oh man,
I know Needles.
Jeez, man.
You went
Needles in the 60s?
Yeah.
You're talking like in the late 60s? Oh my God.
That's where I went to high school.
Oh, yeah. I went to Saguaro, Scottsdale, West, and McClintock. All four.
You went to McClintock?
I never graduated from any of those, and I had 3 credits by the time it was all said and done. And 2 of those were in ROTC, which is why they ended me up in the Army. And I had to take the ROTC. It was never my decision. It was one of those things I was forced to take. And,
Well, I couldn't get in the Army because I'm blind in one eye.
Wow.
But a couple of guys in suits saw my brother and I hunting one day and saw me shooting. The next day, they showed up at the house and wanted to know if I wanted a job with DOD. I ended up in NAM for 18 months as a contractor.
I was with CSOG.
Okay.
In the early through 74.
I left there and I got back stateside just in time, about 2 weeks before Woodstock. So I spent my home time at Woodstock.
You spent your money at Woodstock.
I was the relief pitcher. You played the 9 innings, and then they sent me in to do the cleanup work at the end of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timeline worked. Yeah, because I went in at the end of 71. So.
Yeah, well, I left NAB just about 2 weeks before Woodstock. I got home just in time to go to Woodstock.
I got
a bunch
of us.
Because I was to the point I didn't give a damn about anything.
Yeah, a bunch of us left out of San Francisco in somebody's, and I should know the guy's last name, and for the sake of it, I cannot remember his last name, but it was a Jaguar, and it was a 4-door. It was a 4-door long stretch Jaguar, so it was a mid-60s Jag.
That was a beauty Jag.
And yeah, and
old Rolls Royce
look
alike
in a driveway in Hollywood, right? So we're up at San Francisco, and these are all dropouts now. Okay, so most of these kids are fairly well-to-do. They're supposed to be attending classes at Berkeley. They're basically hanging out in Haight-Ashbury, pretending to be a new religious order of consciousness in the world while they're making LSD in the basement. And, so this whole thing comes up about, we're seeing posters are coming into town, and we're seeing this, and everybody's talking. Of course, I'm a kid. I'm like 13 years old. And but they're talking about this, right? And so they're going to head off to, some of the bands at that point that were in the area were going to be playing. They were listed on board. Yeah. So they were going to go, and some other people got together and said, wow, man, we should go along too, right? We weren't invited to go with the entourage, but, we could tag along. And so in this Jaguar with like 7 people and a kid, smaller than me, we headed off for this concert in upstate New York, and we got there 3 days late. There was a lot of garbage and a lot of mud, and a lot of people walking the streets going, hey man, you got $1, but there was no concert. The concert was gone. We missed it. But only by, a matter of hours or days, I mean, we did try to we made the journey, and isn't that what life is all about? It's more about the journey than it is the destination. Mm-hmm. So I got to go to Woodstock. I just didn't get to Woodstock.
Yeah, well, I was still a little kid and in a Christian cult and not likely.
We forgive you.
Not likely to do anything fun until I was in my 30s.
We forgive you. If you didn't grow up in Southern Oregon, you got a prize out of it. Okay? If you were raised in a Christian-based cult, and it wasn't in Southern Oregon or Mormon and in Utah or in Mesa, Arizona, or their parts of the Arizona, then you did pretty good. Because the ones that grew up in those locations in so-called Christian cults, they had it real bad. I mean, they had it terrible bad, and what they did to the boys was unimaginable. I mean, they would throw a 12-year-old boy out in the streets and tell him to go fend for himself.
Yeah, I lived in Klamath. I've spent my senior year of high school in Klamath Falls.
Yeah.
Well, I
mean, the Amish weren't that bad.
I was considered a property, so.
Yeah.
My father was mortified that I was a science math geek. It made it harder to find a good husband for me.
Yeah, most idiots don't want a wife that's smarter than they are. Now, geniuses like myself go, I gotta find one smarter than me.
That's the
Because
reason
I
we
keep
get,
screwing everything up. So I
That's the
need
reason we
somebody
get
that
along
knows
so
more
well.
than I do to keep me out of trouble.
that's the
Don't
reason we get along so well.
don't let him kid you. He's smarter than I am. He comes up to me, side by side like men do, and he says, "I know you really want to do this, but I think you really ought to rethink it." And then he'll just walk away. He doesn't yell and scream. He doesn't pull all the logic. He just says, "I think you ought
Judd,
to
you got to
rethink
read the
that."
book. She was never that kind. In 42 years, I mean, she she never did it in front of other people. She never, but she'd say things like, "I was up for a deal, and I'd been a chef de cuisine, and that was a cool gig because I could get paid a lot of money for a very short period of time. I would go into a restaurant and I would do my thing for 90 days, 120 days, make tons of money, and then walk.
Yeah.
And all my expenses were paid, and then I was free to go bid myself out to the next gig. And I made good money doing that, and I enjoyed the lifestyle. And when I wasn't playing chef de cuisine, I was playing horse whisperer. So I would train horses for private ranches across America. I worked for several different places training their stock, and it worked very well. And when I met my Tracy, we sort of followed the same suit. But along the way, I had this gig coming up, and I had to decide whether or not I wanted to take this gig or I wanted to stay in the direction I was already heading. And she would walk up and say something like, "Well, I don't know why you're asking me, because you're going to do whatever you want to do anyway. Won't you, chef? Mr. Chef, right? And then she turned around, and then as she turned away, as she did that, what was her, Daisy Duke, right? As she did that little Daisy Duke, give me the butt, right? And strut away in her little waitress uniform, and she'd say something like, "I think you could do it if you wanted to. Love ya." And off she'd go.
At least she'd toss in the love ya.
Yeah, but I mean, she'd be like, "Let me make you feel like an acorn that just fell out of an oak tree, okay?" Because it's like
my daddy said that eloquence was the ability to make someone feel 2 inches tall without ever using a cuss word. That was his definition of eloquence.
I like the story about the scientists and the monkey. And the scientists were trying to teach the monkey to feed the elephant. And somewhere along the line, the scientists got mixed up in the laboratory, and they got busy over at this console doing something, and they couldn't see what was going on. And through the process, every time that the elephant would relieve itself, the monkey would make strange faces and so as they were looking away, the next thing they saw was the paramedics coming into the building. And they asked these guys what had happened. And the one scientist tells the story, says, "I don't know. I sort of heard this grunt. I turned to see what was going on, and boom, everything blew up." And they got to the second scientist, and they said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I don't know." He said, "I've been working with the monkey and the peanuts." And he said, "I was teaching the monkey how to take the cork out of the peanut bottle, or the peanut can, to get to the peanuts." And he said, "And I turned to go to the console," and he said, "The next thing I know, boom." And he got to the third scientist, and the third scientist says, "What did you see?" And the third scientist says, "Nothing." He said, "Nothing." He said, "It was just guts everywhere." He said, "But the last thing I remember seeing was that poor little monkey trying to pull the cork back out." There's supposed to be a laugh there somewhere.
I'm about to bust. I'm sitting here stunned. You didn't catch me stunned. I was
keep pulling the cork. Yeah, see.
I was stunned.
Had to pull the cork out. If he'd left the cork,
Lou's laughing. I'm just sitting here turning bright red.
See, this, folks, is why I was never on television, because I always sat in the background and let somebody else sit out front and deliver the funny lines, because it's not my game.
I make a good straight man.
I'm great around a campfire on a Friday night with a bunch of tourists at a dude ranch. You know, I'm real good there. Storytelling at that point is just natural. And I was good on AM radio at 2 o'clock in the morning when there wasn't technically anybody out there listening anyway, so I could say whatever I wanted to, and I could muse on about all kinds of ideas. And then all of a sudden letters started coming into the radio station. People were actually listening to that crap, and I went, oh, how do I do this now intentionally? I wasn't doing it intentionally at the beginning, I just was doing it, you know? Talk, Bob, don't dead air, no dead air, right? You want to keep the job, you don't, no dead air, right?
Yeah, I know that feeling.
But I found out I was very popular amongst truckers. Guys on the highway, midnight truckers. Yep, guys cutting across.
Truckers are good people, and they need somebody to keep them awake.
So I was it, and I guess my tin pan cornbread humor has some endearing quality. I'll be danged if I know what it is.
Well, I've had this running sarcasm in my head for years, and I have learned.
They have glue you can fill that up with now. You know?
Good idea.
The chasms, they can fix those chasms with glue now.
I did learn when I was still working for a living that it's not a good idea to let those thoughts come out of my mouth.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I'm insane, and I'm a master. I'm a master, a sage of the arcana. Cool. And I actually divined a system which is anybody with a little intuitive input can do a perfect reading off of a tarot card spread for whoever the questionant is on the other side of the table. And cool. I wrote a manual, and I ran 900 numbers, and I did all that good stuff. And I had my heyday where I got to be the holy roller dude and all that.
The holy roller.
Yeah, in those days, can you imagine going to work for a Sears Corporation at the upper echelon management of one of their public operations and letting them know that, you used to be, Bob the psychic on a 900 telephone line?
That'd be scary.
They look at that contract and they don't even laugh. They just kind of look at you like, you really think we're that stupid that we would hire you? But see, my instruction came from P.T. Barnum. So never had an education. They took me out of 4th grade, never put me back. And by the time they put me back, it was 8th grade, and I had absolutely nothing in common with my peers.
Had too much life experience.
Immediate explosion, right? I've been hanging out with these 20-year-olds.
Life experience.
Listening to 40-year-olds, and most of my escort students were psychology students, right? That's why they took me on. I was credits in their class. So you be the escort for this test kid. Yeah, he's your kid. You pick him up in the morning at this time. He gets dropped by bus at this location. You pick him up on campus at this time, and you babysit him for the rest of the day. It's like having your little brother along.
Right.
Okay, you take him to class, whatever. He has certain obligations, and it's up to you to make sure he meets those obligations. So I have to be at this center or at that classroom at certain times, and they knew what those schedules were, and it was their job to do that. Now, at the same time, see, I'm a test subject. So for that student is writing a paper on me.
Yeah.
Okay, while other people are observing how I'm acting or interacting in various classes. So now my escort might be majoring in psychology, maybe childhood development, something of that nature, okay? But I'm the assignment for this semester. And that kid is also taking a class in anthropology. So guess what? I get to sit in the anthropology class.
And you get to learn from
And about the time I raise my hand and ask a question, that student and myself are now moved down to the front row, and the professor is now talking to me through the majority of the class.
Thinking you're a student.
Rather than to the students behind me in the gallery who are paying to be there. Because talking to me is, I've got this wonderful open mind for information at this point in my life. So they're like going, man, you're a sponge. I want to give you it all right here, right now. And they did.
Awesome.
Some of it stuck, some of it didn't. Most of it didn't. It all does. That's the funny part. It's all there.
Yeah, it's all there. It's just whether you
there's
believe
so
it or
much
not.
of it got put in so rapidly. You know, if you can imagine sitting and watching hours and hours of TED Talks, then walking away and going out and planting and harvesting a field of hay, and then coming back in and somebody says, hey, blah, 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 about this or that, the other thing, and you go, oh, well, that's a this and that and this and that and that and that. And then you go, I don't know where I know that from, right? You know, one of those TED Talks, I picked it up. It's still in there, you know, but it's not rambling around where I can play with it. It's just there when I need it.
Now, in my world, I was sitting there reading the Encyclopedia Americana because I was bored out of my mind. And then I would go to school and these people would ask me something and I would give them the proper answer per the encyclopedia. And they were like, and they kept wanting to move me up a grade. And my Christian cult parents said, no. So
no, that's not good. You know, that's really not good. I know people that did that too. And
I know it's not.
It did not. They were not happy campers. That was not appreciated. The upper tier group did not appreciate the bumper. You know, even if the kid was smart, they didn't appreciate the bumper. And when I first left campus at 4th grade, okay, and the smallest kid in my class, I mean, I was little. Okay, so, you know, they dropped me on this university campus with, 19, 20-year-olds, right? And at first it was, why is he here? And why is he in the way? And da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? They didn't want me there. They didn't like me. They saw me as an interference in their lives. And then after I was there for a while and some of them got to know me and they said, no, he's actually a cool kid. And of course I wanted to fit in. So I wanted to be molded to be just like these older people because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be included, right? And I was good at that. It was, I was a natural born carny. I understood how to do that, and I did it, and it worked for me. But it's funny how you maintain the residual ideas. Again, that brings us back to the topic of the point: is are we being played? Did something really happen to Facebook? Okay, is there an insidious effort somewhere in the shadows to take Facebook down, like Netflix?
They want to take the king
somebody
down.
Like that wants to take them down. They want their piece of the pie. Because here's an interesting part. Transitionally through human history, we're at, the man said it today, the president that was making it, we're at a nexus. We actually are. We're absolutely at a nexus. The planet is in a nexus in its orbits around the sun, because every so often you see there has to be this kind of unnatural natural adjustment, or we would end up catapulting out into space. It's physics. I can't really explain it, but I understand how it works. I've seen it demonstrated. Okay, with a live model on a table, and they showed, exactly what would happen. And so it has to make this adjustment in its proximities. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It would explain what's going on currently with volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tidal waves, etc., the things that have been going on for the last couple of years, really. Also, global warming would be inclusive in that program. That, part of this would be because we are too close to the sun. At this particular point in our orbits around the sun, which changes every time we go around, it changes at a different angle. Otherwise, we'd fly away. So we're at that nexus there organically, or cosmically, if you will. Then you have the human evolutional aspect. You have the Mayan calendar, which, if I understand this correctly, and please Dr. Odin, if I am wrong here, please inform me of such. He's not paying attention.
I am paying attention. I'm just looking at
I
boobies.
think the Mayan calendar was 24,000 years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Was 24,000?
25,000 years. Yes.
25,000 year cycle. See, so the end was in 2012, and the end was the end of that cycle. 25,000
Yeah, and
years.
it started a new cycle.
And it started a new cycle. Now that doesn't mean that you just turn the lights on and off. Okay, it's a wind up kind of thing. It's got to get going. It's where it's going to start, and this is what's going to happen. And then this 25,000 years is going to start all over again. And if you really want, you can look back there and see what they wrote down as to how they survived the cataclysm.
Well, if you take a look through the Hindu holy books, they call them yugas, and they are cycles that the planet goes through. And yeah, they tell you how to go through it.
Where I'm getting my information. Like I said, I studied a lot of cultures.
Listens.
Yes.
Nobody listens because that's not what my religion says.
Well,
That's one of the biggest things that I've been up against in the last couple of years is religion.
Were you present?
Religion.
Were you present while I was talking to Mr. Stanley? Previous program before I came on here.
Robert Stanley.
Robert Stanley.
No,
we were talking about that, and I raised the point because we were talking about the. Of course, he's following the ideology of Anu and the Anunnaki, okay, and that they are the origin, and that we're actually transplants on this planet or some such story, okay, and not discounting one way or another, but we did come to the common consensus that at the time, what we would call Noah's flood, from that time forward, we have been the product of dogmatic instruction. So whether you were a Hindu or whether you were a Buddhist, whether you were later a Muslim, a Christian, a Judean, it didn't matter. It was all based on a dogma, every bit of it.
Well,
you can track it all back to where one person started laying out a philosophy and everybody else around bought it. But in every case, up to and including, and here I'm going to offend some people, and if you're offended, it's your own fault because you haven't thought it through. I'm only thinking it through.
Please don't.
Okay? When Jesus was on the hill,
which hill?
They came to him and they had so many fish and a couple of loaves of bread, etc. And there were all this huge crowd of people showed up, kind of like Woodstock. You were expecting 100,000, you got 500,000. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Okay, so somehow or another, Jesus supposedly gave them all bread and fish. Now, that being the story, he just bribed them to buy his dogma. Now, nobody wants to put it in that context because it sounds really terrible. But when you get black and white with it,
religion is the cause of all warfare and most hatred on this planet.
Religion is society.
But it is.
They are one and the same. Society is devised and developed off of the dogma of a religion. So a religion sets the policies and the rules. This many people gather, they live by those rules, and they now refer to themselves as a society.
What came first, the king or belief? It's like the chicken and the egg.
Are we stuck on titles?
Chicken or the egg?
Are we stuck on titles?
Well, we did have a Pope Emperor Charlemagne.
The answer would be
Pope Emperor Charlemagne. Hold on.
Only it wouldn't have been the title king, but it would have been the leader.
Okay. Oh, that's the question.
The eldest of the clan until the clan got so big, and then you had too many of equal age that were now the elders. So the elder dies off. Now you've got his sons, which are, let's say they're in their 30s, okay, and they all claim that they should be the next boss.
Fight for it.
And the people now have to make a decision as to which one to select.
Mortal Kombat.
Leader.
No,
But this was done primarily historically. This was done by great deed. So it was usually the strongest fighter or the best horseman or the greatest warrior.
Why not the best wizard?
Who fought the most battles and didn't lose.
Okay.
Was the leader of the people. The people said, we want you to lead because you have the most solid experience. Now, in time, that would become king. But in the day, the people chose the leader they followed. The leader didn't declare himself a ruler, and that's the difference when you use the term king. Because king is suggesting, I declare myself to be your ruler. I am king, and you will acknowledge me as king. But if I'm just a guy who's been out in these woods more often than everybody else, and we just crashed in an airplane, okay, and everybody looked at me and said, hey man, you're the guy with the cowboy hats and the crap on your boots. Show us how to get the hell out of here. This is foreign country to us. Well, that makes me a leader. It doesn't make me a king or a ruler.
Unless you build a society around that area.
Ah, now you have society. And where does society come from? Society is the patchwork of religion.
Or the king.
Social order.
Or the king.
Ah, but the king, going way back in history now, the king, as we know kings, okay, from about
or the leader,
the 10th century, I believe, if not before that, okay, were solidly deemed and controlled by one individual who was called the pontiff in Rome.
Okay, so you now you got the
divine right, gave upon select families who paid a fee, a contribution to the church, participated in the early crusades, okay, gained the right of kings.
Well, that's modern ideology.
Before that,
So
it
that
was the
Pope,
bloodline.
or what do they call it? Spilled the water, ornated him.
Ordinate.
No, the ointment. Anointed, thank you. Anointed them with the holy water and the holy seed that can only come through the Pope in the Vatican. And he said, from this point forward, beau font, mont, bump, you are the rightful royal heir to your people. And he went off and took Christianity and a whole bunch of monks with him.
But you're dealing only with Christianity and one ideology. But you're dealing only.
God's reference on this world has anointed me his heir in state and named me king. And that's where the right of kings come in virtually every nation on earth.
For this belief
It's a
system.
lot older than that.
Only they got theirs from the Muslim concept, not from the Catholic.
But it goes older than that. I mean, there were.
But those were leaders. They weren't kings. They were leaders of clans.
It goes way back.
Way back.
Into Sumer and Egypt and the Chinese. It goes way back, and it has to do
but
with
those are not the rights of
bloodline.
kings. Those are the rights of rulers by domination or leaders of clans. And when leaders of clans determine that the other clan, come on, I mean, it gets back to this, and Odin and I have had this conversation now, I think, in every episode, okay? What do we need to survive? Okay, food, we need water, we need shelter, we like companions. Other than that, we have no needs. You don't need a car, you don't need a house,
Well,
you don't need all
hold
that
on.
crap.
David was named
You
king.
need simple food, simple shelter, clean water, okay? And it's nice to have a companion. You'll live longer with a companion than you will without one. Okay, that's just a given.
Yeah, because you'd be spreading your juice.
In a lot of situations. So, other than that, what do we need? Okay, we only need someone to show us how to get and or control those resources. And we did that in the family. I had sons, my sons had sons, now we have a clan. Okay,
I have
the clan
a
survives on
question
the
for
clan.
you.
Go, man.
Why do you exist?
To experience.
Really?
Yep.
You're not here because somebody else needed you?
That's part of the experience. And I need them. It's part of the game of happenstance. So I am here. My reason for being here, as I understand it, is to experience being here. Okay? Covered this before. If you are part of the holy elegance of the universe, if we are but a spark of energy that we call the soul, that life force that makes us who we are, our consciousness comes from a giant pool of energy out there someplace away from here that we cannot see and understand. And we come one at a time down here and we enter into this realm, and there's a lot of philosophies how that works.
And assuming
we enter in and we become that fertilized baby that has that consciousness, that spark in it. So now its heart will beat, its brain will develop, etc. Now, here's the problem. When you came from the collective, you were of the collective. You departed the collective until such time as you became part of this human being. You were still part of the collective, in touch with the collective. But once you entered this human being and now had to deal with senses, things you did not have when you were part of the collective, it was all knowing. So there was no vision, there was no sound, there was no smell, no taste, no feel, no nothing. Wasn't there. It was perfect, right? It's heaven. It was perfect. Now here you are.
Okay, I got one.
So what other logical explanation can there be for coming here and losing contact with that source that you came from?
I got one for
in
you.
order to develop the senses that you are given, if it's not solely to experience, to see it, to taste it, to smell it, to know it, to feel it, to understand it. What is it that we're trying to understand?
Maybe it's our
becomes the next obvious question in line. We're here to understand something, but what is it we're supposed to understand? And does that remain a secret till the moment that we have that enlightenment and go, I get it now? And then that's when you have the massive coronary and die and go back to heaven.
Okay, so what if we don't come from a mysterious place out there, because that's philosophy. Maybe the planet's a living source.
Then you have the Anunnaki, which is
but the planet's a living source
out there and came here
and they stuck here. And they stuck here. So let's go back to that point. Say the planet is the living source where we came from. Oops! Now everybody's philosophy just got flat roasted into a damn oven.
No, technically, if you follow the Anunnaki story, we are not. And if you follow the Christian, Hebrew, and Muslim theories,
they always look out there.
And if you follow the Hindu and the Buddha theories, we are not.
From where?
In every one of those processes, up to and including the Anunnaki. Now, we're going to hold them off to the side. I'm going to address that last. But of all of those others, there was a great being.
Okay.
Who waved his hand, blinked his eyes, twitched his nose.
Could have been Mother Earth. Could have been Mother Earth.
Put man on this planet. It's in every story.
Could have been Mother Earth.
We did not exist on this planet. In none of those stories did we exist on this planet. In 7 days, he did this, then he made the firmament of the land, then he made the water, then he made and then eventually man was put, made out of clay, put onto this earth.
Made
given
on
life
this planet.
And reality. Okay, now that's the story. Now let's go back to the Anunnaki. Now where the story differs, where it becomes very interesting, by the way, if you think about this, put away all the bull that you've listened to, all the dogma you know. It's your truth, and I'm not telling you to let go of your truth. I'm asking you to think of a different approach.
Okay.
Just think about it, like a novel. Could you believe this story if you saw it on a Hollywood movie screen? Okay? So here come these individuals,
Hollywood.
Not from here. They come here. Now, the story varies in two different ways. One, there was something here which they messed with.
Genetic manipulation.
And that became us. Or they brought us here and seeded the planet with us. That's a little bit more godlike.
Still we're
now,
here. Still we're
right?
here.
Because we were cattle from another planet. They brought us here. They dropped us in, and they said, be fruitful, multiply. Now, with the Anunnaki, you get the stories of intended or perpetuated slaveries. On one hand, you can read from Enoch and Gilgamesh and all of that, and you can grasp from that, if you choose to, the idea that there were those who saw us as toys to play with, and there were those who saw us as something of usefulness.
Toys for heavenly boys.
So they taught, so they instructed, so they gave this half man, half monkey creature this ability to understand.
I want my tail back.
To calculate, to think, to plant seeds, to herd animals, to not things we knew. We were absent-headed apes.
Where the animals come from?
So they gave us this knowledge, and from this knowledge now we grew and became and evolved. Now the story says there was a great upheaval amongst the Anunnaki. In one story, you're going to get a tale that tells you how they rose up and they killed the gods. In another story from another culture, you're going to get a story about how they rose up and they struck down the Titans. In another story, you're going to get another scenario where they burned down all the temples and eradicated the gods.
Sounds like Greek.
Or there's the Gilgamesh version of the story, which suggests that the gods got pissed at each other, as brothers or siblings often do, and they had a fight. And when they were done and everybody had bloody noses, they all went running off to their own corners or to their own mommies or whatever it was, and left us and forgot all about us.
Or God died.
Yeah, or we killed the gods. Either way, man, the meek now, by contrast to the Anunnaki, we are the meek, inherited the earth. Story kept.
And the gods still
okay?
And the gods still exist.
The meek inherited the earth. We are the meek. But we didn't stay meek. You see, that was the problem. Whatever they did, whether we are a transplant, whether we are a genetic adaptation, and I would say, okay, let's go with the Big Bang origin theory and say that man evolved from a single-celled thing swimming around in a pool of ick, okay, and eventually multiplied cells till he stepped up out of the muck and he became Neanderthal.
Or whatever.
Now, this alien species from another, we call them aliens, but these people from another world come here, they see the Neanderthal, and they say, hey, if we give him some of our DNA into some of his DNA, we're going to get a man, M-N-A, M-A-N.
Or let's have sex with them.
We're going to get an M-A-N. Okay, so from the DNA, we get an M-A-N. All right, so here we are. Okay, now, either way you spell that story, it still brings you to the same conclusions. All directions lead to the same conclusions. They just have their own version of getting there. And, as is human nature, we know that the victor gets to write the history. Nobody ever goes to the loser and says, hey man, tell me the story about how you lost. No, man, there's none of him left. You know, centuries, millennia ago, okay, we wiped out the enemy. We went to their village and we killed every man, woman, and child in that village. We didn't leave anybody alive, and if we did, we took them back to be labor.
Or sex pots.
Cheap hunk labor. because they were the defeated ones and we were the victors, and the victors get to write the story of how noble and wonderful their conquest was of these evil people who, by the way, never did anything to them except grow better corn. And so since they wanted the other guy's corn, they just went over and kicked his butt and took it.
Good corn.
Okay? You don't leave your enemy to stand up and come back after you in retaliation. That's just stupid. A species does not survive by doing that. It defies everything in the animal kingdom, and like it or not, we are animals. As I said in the first episode, I think we brought it up. Sorry, young lady, we are all viruses. So maybe they did bring viruses to this planet. Maybe those aliens brought viruses here. It's called man. We're the virus. They dropped a parasite on this planet and said, let's see what happens in the petri dish when the planet evolves, or when the species evolves. 5 million generations out. Let's see what we get as an experiment. And they left. And maybe that's what we are. But I bring to this the context, to bring this to context. That's the problem. That's why you're a victim of dogma. That's why the stories have been told, the truths have been seeded, the people have bought into the truth, the people are now ready to stand and fight and bloody one another over their differing opinions as to whether they should butter the bread on the top or butter the bread on the bottom. And it comes down to something that damn simple. But you see, that's all based on what was. And was isn't relevant anymore. Was doesn't count anymore. Will be is what we should be thinking about. Does it matter who caused global warming if we're in the midst of it and we can't do anything to stop it? Oh, we can sit around and muse about that. We can have arguments. We can do a lot of things. First thing we need to think about is, if that's the point, how are we going to survive this thing? Are we being played?
Yeah.
Are we being played at every level? See, is there a new form of dogma coming to the table now that is based on technology? Did the Terminator movie series have something right? Was there a piece of information in there? Not the whole story, just one little nugget of knowledge for you to chew on. And all I have to do to anybody who saw those movies or read the books is say Skynet.
What up?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there it is, you see. Because isn't that exactly what we're building? Aren't we literally driving to emulate what Hollywood gave us as sci-fi fantasy? We are desperately trying to make into reality because we're looking for a new God.
I need a mad
See,
Martian.
no matter which story you take, if you recognize that it's dogma, if you recognize that the beginning and the root of every story is some joker who wanted to be on the top of the pyramid and have everything all of the time and never have to do anything for it except ask, "What this?" "Yes, Lord Master, you can have this." "Why haven't the slaves brought me new oranges?" "Well, it's the middle of December, your lordship. There are no oranges." "Well, kill the slaves then, damn it. Find me some that can get me oranges." This is what they want. And the dogma that they projected was to control the masses. And I give you Noah coming off the hill with 10 commandments. And the first thing he had to convince those people down there in that valley of, 40,000 of them, was that these weren't his rules. Okay? Oh, don't get mad at me, man. They're not my rules. His rules, man. The burning bush guy. It's his rules. And he will smite you down if you break his rules. And if he doesn't smite you down in this lifetime, he will definitely get you at the end of the game, because you got to go through him to get back to heaven. If that's in fact where you came from. And he used that dogma to control 40,000 people, which became a culture, which became a society, which is now a nation in this world we live in today. Okay?
Brainwashing.
Dogma, one man's dogma to a group of people, and they believed him. Now, they talk in the Bible about miracles that happen and lightning bolts. Maybe that did. Maybe that did. Or maybe all of it was dogma to reinforce the dogma.
Maybe it was a good
So
story.
you need to explain how this comes to be. Just telling me that this comes to be is nice when I'm 5. But by the time I'm 10, I want to know why it came to be that way. How to get there. Where'd it come from? See, the one common question that I believe every human being has, and a flaw in the program. Because if it's all perfect, then there's a flaw in the program. A trade-off, if you will, for understanding how to be a steward over all the other creatures in the fields, of all the plants, of all the earth, of all the rocks in the water, all the fishes in the sea and the birds in the sky. Okay? To be able to put ourselves in their place, to understand things from their perspective, to be a good steward. We also have this driving curiosity that's stuck in us. Where'd I come from?
I know where I came from.
Commonplace. Every human being since the dawn of time, you know, the Og walked out of the cave all by himself in the late night, got to the edge of the fire glow, stood there and looked up at the wonderful sky above him, and went,
Duh.
where am I from, man?
I like the way you said that, though.
How did I get here?
You know, one
Hey,
problem.
I've been stoned, I know it. Hey, man, you know my address?
Hey,
I don't know where I live, man.
There's one big issue. There's one big issue, and I gotta say it. People today don't ask the questions who, what, where, when, why when they read anything.
The problem is,
And how.
and I this is not a long-term problem, but your psychology processes getting to that PhD would have got you there somewhere along the line.
Hold on,
where this would have
3.4.
been a subject matter. And I know because every time I say it, you go, hey. Okay.
You know I'm leaving it for last. I know what you're talking about already.
Prior to the days of when, of yore, okay, my days, okay, as a young adult becoming a young father, they gave us a thing called Sesame Street. Now, it started before that. Goes back quite a way. Sherry Lewis and her lamb chop. It goes back. But they basically gave the children, the juvenile generation, the under 8 kids, puppets for role models. Not people.
Puppets.
Okay, I mean, yes, I had Captain Kangaroo, and yes, I had Mickey Mouse Club, and yes, I had Bozo the Clown, and yes, but those were people. Those were people who were giving me input. Now I'm taking the input from these puppets. And the puppets are telling me things that are just slightly askew of what Preacher John tells me on Sunday morning.
Sure it's not Preacher John?
See, Preacher John says, the righteous shall inherit. God chooses his favorites. The soldiers of Jesus will march to defeat the agents of Satan.
We will wear our cross.
Now go to Vietnam and sacrifice your life for your country and your flag. Thank you very much. Good night. Have a great day. Sing hallelujah. That's one thing. Now over here they're telling me that I shouldn't be mad at this person, or I shouldn't care about that being mine. If they took it from me and played with it, I should be willing to share. Now you see these puppets are giving them a little bit different line of thinking. And over time, literally manipulating those thoughts. Now, you say I'm wrong, but you can go be fact checkers out there. Go do your fact checking. In the I believe it was in the late 1960s or the early 1970s. I believe it was out of Milwaukee, but I could be wrong about the location, but it was a Midwestern city of note. There was an afternoon, or was it maybe it was a morning show, because in those days they were morning shows. It was a morning show hosted TV cartoon show for kids. So like Bozo the Clown or any of those.
Mm-hmm.
He was a local guy with a local show.
Mm-hmm.
He is probably still doing time in federal prison if he's still alive, and I doubt that seriously. But he literally was caught and taped even before they had pre-recorded programming. They taped him in order to have the evidence in court of him telling little kids to go into mommy's bedroom, find mommy's wallet, take out a $5 bill, put that in an envelope with a note, and send that to Uncle Bozo. Right? Only it wasn't Bozo. I want to clarify that. It was not Bozo. But Uncle
who you're
whomever,
talking
right?
about. Oh,
And kids were doing this.
yeah, I know who you're talking
And the
about.
parents were oblivious. They had no idea their kid was going into their wallet, taking money out of their wallet, sending it to this guy. I mean, we're talking about 5 and 6 year olds. Mommy, I wrote a note to Uncle so-and-so. Can I mail this? And mommy says, oh, sure, sweetheart.
It's
She
only
puts a stamp
2
on it,
cents.
mails it for her.
Right.
Okay? And this guy's raising money doing this. And the FCC came in and the FBI came in and they had his hiney. But you see, Sesame Street would do almost the same thing. Use the same psychological profiling, use the same basic bait and switch scenario, okay? You get gratification and encouragement from doing this, and you get sad faces and pouty noses and just when you do that.
And you get to play a Big Bird.
And so you'll do, because mommy and daddy are absent now. See, it's not Sesame Street, as insidious as it was from the programming writer side of the game. And remember, these people had an agenda. They didn't just write that stuff up by accident. Okay, Miss Piggy and Big
Kermit.
Bird and all. No. Every bit of that was structured very carefully, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of psychology majors, okay, who were inputting feed on those characters and how they would be depicted, what they would say, and how their physical characteristics would be, all to impress that 4-year-old sitting in front of the TV, stuck there like a magnet, eating it all up. And they said, look, man, we can play with these kids. We learned this when we had old Cowboy Bob, when he was Cowboy Bobby, okay, back there in school all those years ago. We learned how to do this. He showed us. We used him as the guinea pig. Now we can do this to a whole generation, and we can use broadcast television to do it. And hey, we can tie this to a nonprofit public access television station so as to detract the fact that it's actually government funded and government designed with a government plan basing on a government agenda, which they're now giving you a government narrative.
MK Ultra.
And hello, ladies and gentlemen, did Facebook go down because somebody went, oops? Is there a new opening at Facebook.com? Is somebody, in the engineering department trip over a cable? There's a job available there, I'm pretty damn sure. Or are they having a tizzy fit and they gave us a 7-hour expression of what life would be like if they weren't there anymore and you couldn't reach your friend and your family?
They put us in the corner.
Or is a whole thing a setup in another direction, whereas the whistleblower isn't really blowing the whistle as much as she's tooting the horn? Not only for her own notoriety and celebrity, which she will be now because she's been everywhere in the last 24 hours and will be around now as a reference point on camera probably for the next couple of weeks while this thing unfolds and everybody gets all up in arms about it. But what if That was the strategy of Facebook in the first place. You see, what if the planes that flew into the World Trade Center were done through collaboration by intention in order to encourage us to demand that we have airport security such as the TSA.
We need
To
protection.
demand that we create another multi-billion-dollar organization or corporation in this country that we call Homeland Security, which, by the way, is very much a reflection by dynamic and design. So forget the titles. Look at the design. Top-down, management, midfield, split level, crossover, every textbook you ever read if you took Business 101. The diagram of, okay? And Homeland Security fits right in the same place that the Gestapo did for the Nazi regime. These are the people who will run the brown shirts. The brown shirts are your kids. It was the kids first, you see. They went after the kids, they convinced the kids, and then the kids came back and told the person at the school what mommy and daddy did last night that was against the Fuhrer's rules, and mommy and daddy were arrested and punished, and the kid was rewarded. And that's how they got control of the society and the culture at the time. And that's exactly what they're working on now. From my perspective, now, I'm a lunatic. I got a 4th grade education. I'm better off talking to horses out on the range than I am talking to humans on the internet. But there's my 2 cents worth, sitting on a fence post staring at the sky. This is what I see. I see this happen. And I question every one of you in our goal to, and I still love this, D, absolutely, in the realm and return of the thinking man. Not male. Mankind, the thinking man. Come back to thinking. Think about this stuff. Recognize the face paint, the bullshit, the icing on the cake. Look what they're doing. Okay? If I go out to the farmyard and I get a shovel and I scoop up behind a cow and I throw that in a pretty box and I tie a pretty paper around it and a pretty ribbon and I put it under a Christmas tree, it still is a pretty crappy Christmas present, isn't it?
And
but
it
you were
stinks.
so excited to open it up based on the way it looked on the surface till you smelled what was inside the box. Then you weren't so thrilled. So maybe think about it. Maybe look at it. You see, they're not that smart. If they were, I would have never been able to be a part of them. I would have never been able to be successful in the fields that I followed because I had to be them. I had to be the advertising guy. I had to come up with a clever slogan. I had to come up with a clever artwork. I had to find a band to play the clever jingles. I had to put it all together. I wasn't Madison Avenue. I was a little independent guy in Cleveland, Ohio. But I survived and I thrived in the process. So I must have been pretty good at what I did, or I wouldn't have stayed in business very long doing it. So the point is, I learned their game from them. They showed me, they were eager to show me all the inside tricks. I'm telling you, they're using those inside tricks every day, and they're using them now, and you're smart enough to see through them. If you want to be. If you want to be. And remember, life is about choices. What's that, time out?
Yeah. Time.
I'm 7 minutes over. Hey, you owe me 20 from the other day.
Man.
Hey, so I will wrap this up then. I was there anyway. Sorry, I'm a little over time. Absolutely. You have free choice. Not about the past. You already made those choices. They're done. You don't get to remake them. There's no do-overs, okay? This isn't Mario Brothers. You don't get to push a button and try again. You made those choices. Those things happen. The free choice you have now is what you do next. The choices you make right now, tomorrow, the day after. Where are you going with your world? And I hope it'll be right back here next Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Cowboy Bob in what we call Backstory right here on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network at GERN.com. with our host and producer, the one, the only, the mighty Odin.
Oh, thanks for
Say
waking
goodnight,
me up.
boss.
Good night, boss.
Well, it's another story. Well, it's another story. Well, it's another story.
Backstory.
Another story. Well, it's another story.
Good night, Denzel.